All right, it is the B Block Podcast. Welcome in. Appreciate you for joining me. If you are not already, make sure you are subscribed to the B Block Podcast, especially on YouTube. You can also do that wherever it is you get your podcasts. Got a special guest with me. And look, I'm gonna start off with this by asking Adam Spolane, are you rested, man? I've missed you. And so I hope that you are well rested. I got my podcasting partner of old, Adam Spolane. We used to do a podcast called the H-Town Hoops Podcast that covered the Houston Rockets that ended abruptly. But it's been like almost a year since we've done that podcast. So I ask you before we even get started, are you well rested? Are you ready to go? Are you ready to pod since we ain't done this in damn near a year?
I mean, it can't go any worse for me than the last time we did a pod together. So, I mean, I don't want to jinx it. Check back with me tomorrow at about 1:00, and we'll know for sure. But yeah, I'm good to go.
It's so funny because the pod ended abruptly because none of us were expecting the news that we got. And obviously you were let go. And I was so offended by the whole thing that I didn't even care to do the professional thing of like doing a wrap-up episode of like, hey guys, like I know I might have even owed it to whatever small audience we actually had at that point. But I was like, man, fuck this podcast, man. If Adam Spolane ain't gonna be a part of it, we can even make like it never happened until the 10 months later when we pop up on one of our own podcasts. So
I just remember we finished that pod and we were talking out loud about the schedule moving forward. And then right before we got off, I said, hey man, boss wants me to come in tomorrow, so let's not get ahead of ourselves with that schedule. And I said it kind of joking, and as it turned out, it was not a joke. 1:00, they dropped the hammer.
Hey, you said it joking, but I responded seriously, like they better not. Like hell no, that's not no. And I feel like my response was in kind too. Like, well, all right, well, if that's how much y'all care, then that's how much I care. And I should probably leave it at that before I get myself in trouble. But needless to say, neither of us was happy in that moment, man. So before we get started, man, it's been hell. I want to say last time I looked at it, it's been like almost 10 months, if not an
11.
entire year, 11 months since we
11
did the
months
last
next week.
podcast. Give us an update, man. I saw you writing for the crawfish boxes. Of course, you're still on the scene at Texans games. We run into each other. I honestly have missed you at Toyota Center. Have missed like familiar faces like yours, Jonathan Fagans, now Danielle Lerner. It's like it's kind of different without some of the usuals, if you will. So catch us up with what you've been up to over the last year, man.
Yeah, man, I'm good. I'm in sports a little bit still. Instead of, I had, 11 months ago, I had both feet in. Now I probably got just a couple toes in, like you said, crawfish boxes, still freelancing for the AP, doing some Sirius XM stuff, for Texans games. But I'm kind of, in the energy sector now and kind of focusing on that and learning about that on the fly, which is not easy. It's like learning a different language here. But, each day, I feel like I'm getting smarter and smarter with this stuff. So I'm a whole lot smarter on this stuff than I was a few months ago. And hopefully in a few months, I'll be even smarter than I am now. So it's been good. I knew, at the time, whenever you get let go, it sucks. But I knew at the time it was probably going to be the best thing that could happen. And as we stand now, I think it has turned out to be that way. And it doesn't mean that I'm not, pissed off at how everything went down. Because I've still got that in me a little bit, but I think ultimately I knew it was something that needed to happen, and I can honestly say that it's worked out for the better. It has worked. Everything kind of happens for a reason, and I think that what happened to me 11 months ago was the best thing that could have happened to me. So I am happier today than I was 11 months ago. I can say that.
Well, I'll say this not just because we're friends and because you're on the podcast, because you're a guest here, but I truly believe it. Like you're right there with any of the whatever would be considered the best sports reporters in the market and have been for as long as I can remember. So I don't know now, as I say that, I don't know what else you're capable of or if you're capable of doing anything else, because this is all I've ever really known you to do up until now. But the funny part about what you're saying there with the energy sector is like, you yourself don't know what you're capable of until you actually challenge yourself in that kind of way. So I think that that's actually kind of cool for you. I was thinking when you said 11 months and man, I don't know, maybe it's just so much time has flown by now, man, but we missed a playoff run. Like
Yep.
you and I, and of course, you were covering the Rockets for years, oh, well, a decade plus. But when you and I started working together, it was like the final years of the James Harden era, and then into the mud of the Silas era. Basically, we'll call it the what the hell did Sarge coin it? The wow factor era. Uh, we were covering that, and so it kind of sucked to finally get to a spot where the Rockets were a little bit more worth talking about. Because when we started that podcast, H Town Hoops, they were kind of a tough sell to make interesting. They were only interesting because we've been following it for so damn long. But Steven Adams was one of the changes last year, something that they found. The Rockets found the double big lineup late in the season, ended up being something that they were able to go to late in the season, including in the playoffs. So much so that they started with it this year and have leaned on it heavily this year. Of course, we got the news earlier in the week that Steven Adams has had season ending ankle surgery, and it looked like even before that, at best, he wasn't going to be able to come back into the playoffs. So this kind of just confirms what we already know. But I want to lead off top with the news there because I feel like that one is pretty significant. Does does the news of Steven Adams' season-ending surgery take the Rockets out of contention in your mind, or were they even contenders before that, given where they were with the Fred VanVleet injury and all of that?
Yeah, I don't think that they were contenders, once Van Vliet got hurt. I think that pretty much ended their hopes. Losing Van Vliet obviously was going to hurt them this season. I did think that it had the chance of helping them moving forward just because you're going to force Amen Thompson and Reed Shepard to have to play point guard, but that doesn't help for this year. That could help, next year, the year after that. But losing Adams really hurts just because it takes away their biggest strength. And their biggest strength was how they could just bludgeon teams with offensive rebounds. And they'll still be a good offensive rebounding team, but their offensive rebounding rate goes down about 15% when Adams is off the floor. So you go from being maybe the best offensive rebounding team that we've seen in a long time to just being a really good offensive rebounding team. And for a team that struggles to shoot the ball, like, offensive rebounds tend to be their lifeblood. And so not having that as something that they can go to or they can fall back on really hurts. I was looking at the numbers yesterday. I thought that they probably leaned on that big lineup a little too much. But when those two, Şengün and Adams, were on the floor together, they were getting their offensive rebounding rate was 47%. Their offensive rebounding rate with Adams on the floor, just Adams on the floor, 45%. And, when Adams is off the floor, it's at like 37, 38%. So that hurts them. And so now they have to be a little bit more traditional. And if they play traditional against a lot of teams, especially the good teams, if they play traditional against Oklahoma City, they're going to lose. If they play traditional against Denver, they're going to lose. If they play traditional against Minnesota, they're probably going to lose. But having that one thing that they could really lean on, that offensive rebounding, just giving them that advantage, that's something that could win them games. So I think that obviously it hurts them the rest of this season. I didn't think they were contenders this year anyways. But now I do think that it kind of, for them, they can almost recalibrate their expectations a little bit. And I know fans don't want to hear that. I know fans are just like, championship or bust. You have Kevin Durant, but let's be honest. Like, this team as constructed right now is not good enough to beat Oklahoma City or Denver in a 7-game playoff series. And it's probably not good enough to even beat Minnesota in a 7-game playoff series.
Yeah, are you surprised, kind of to the point about the offense and missing Fred VanVleet, and it kind of being like almost like a gap? I don't want to call it a gap year, but maybe for fans and trying to figure out what Amen Thompson and Reed Shepard can handle from a point guard standpoint. Are you more surprised at how well the Rockets started the season
Yes.
offensively, or by how inconsistent it's been since then? Like, what was the more shocker for you?
I was stunned that they were top 3 in offensive rating the first 2 months of the year. I couldn't believe that.
Yeah.
Just the way that they shot the ball to start the year is not something that I would have ever expected. And so the fact that I'm not sure what they're at offensive rating, wise now, but this is more in line with what I thought that they would be when you look at the shooting that they have, or technically that they don't have. So they overachieved offensively at the start of the year. Some of that was the offensive rebounding. Obviously, a lot of that was the better than expected 3-point shooting. And that's tailed off. And
Tari Eason had turned into like better than Steph Curry. He was he was historic for like a 5 or 6 game stretch or something like that.
and Shingun was really good shooting the three to start the year, and Jabari was really good shooting the three to start the year. And listen, 3-point shooting is a high variance stat. You are going to have your great stretches, and you are going to have your awful stretches. They went through an awful stretch. Jabari specifically went through an awful stretch. But I looked at one point; he was like 38% from three. You'll take that for a 2-month stretch. Obviously that's come down quite a bit here in the last couple of weeks, but he has kind of figured things out here a little bit more recently. So I think the fact that they started the season shooting the ball as well as they did, and they were playing so efficiently offensively, was a little bit of an outlier and something that you couldn't expect to continue the rest of the season, especially with Van Vliet out.
Yeah, so I'm looking at it here now. Overall, they're still like top 4 offensive rating, which surprises me.
I think they're
But
20th this month is what I saw.
right, I was gonna say they're 20th this month. Even going back to December 5th is so like after the first 25, you start off 15-5. So they're really good those games. But then December was unforgiving, right? December was a bad month for them. They start off by it was, I think the theme of it was losing to teams that they weren't supposed to lose to. That was kind of their thing. You had the Pelicans game in there, you had the Kings games in there. There were some bad losses, and that's kind of when things started to kind of go down or kind of fall off a cliff. And in January, they've won more games. They've been had better results, but offensively, it's kind of still been up and down a little bit. So, yeah, you mentioned January. We could look at that too. But I was going to say they're top 4 for the season, but if you go back to the 5th of December, it goes down to 11. And like you mentioned, in the month of January, let's see, they are, well, this is saying 11 too. But that can't be right. But either way, the point being is that the offense is falling off a cliff, and a lot of that had to do with guys shooting the ball, shooting three. Oh yeah, 26. You're right, 26th in offensive rating for the month of January. So there's your cliff falling right there. They're ranked 4th overall for the year, but 26 for the month. So it tells you how much work the beginning of the year is doing for you. I'm curious of what you thought of them trying to figure that part out. The Amin Thompson, we can just kind of get into those 2 players now since you mentioned them. And we'll talk about Shingun and Durant, but Thompson and Shepard were the ones that were going to be asked more of, even without Fred VanVleet's injury, but then especially with Fred VanVleet's injury. So let's start with Thompson. That's somebody who I thought was, missing shots that we wasn't supposed to be missing early on in the season, way too many bunnies. And then after a while, seemed to kind of figure it out, but still limits them from the standpoint of a whole defensive strategy can be built around baiting him into taking shots that he has no business taking. And so that's my complaint of Amin Thompson, outside of him just being incredible and amazing around that, aside from the shooting part. What have you thought of his adjustment this season?
The shooting has not come along, I think, the way that I thought it might. And maybe I would, he's a 19% 3-point shooter right now. Like that's tough. And obviously he wasn't a good 3-point shooter last year, but he started to take, some strides in that direction. I mean, he was 14% as a rookie. Last year he was 28%. So you're like, hey, you don't have to take a huge jump from 28%, but if you can just get to the low 30s, that's workable. But to now be, under 20% for the year, that's really difficult. And it just makes you a whole lot easier to defend. And
I mean, it was that way against San Antonio just last night.
yeah,
We're doing this on Thursday, or what is today? Wednesday. What is today?
today's
Whatever
Thursday.
the day. Yeah, Thursday. And so I'm looking at the Wednesday night. I've been turned around on days for like all week, but it might have been the freeze. I don't know. Kids didn't have to go to school Monday. So, but anyway, the Spurs game, perfect example, right? The strategy became, hey, let's just keep an eye on Amin, but not really guard him, and then let Wemby of all people be our help defender. He's got to be the biggest cheat code for a help defender since Bill Russell. So like, I just point that out because guys got to be able to do something, knock down a shot, make a move, do something.
Yeah, that's the Russell Westbrook treatment, basically what he got. And you are going to see more and more teams do this, especially once you get to a playoff series. Like that's all teams are going to do to him once they get to the postseason, is that they are going to, uh, you know, make him shoot over bigger guys like that. And remains to be seen if he can do that. And so, just to go out a little bit from what happened last night against San Antonio, like if they're going to put a guard, a big guard, but a guard nonetheless on Alperen Şengün, like you got to make them pay for that. And when you look at why they struggled offensively in the fourth, in the second half against the Spurs, like not only could they not take advantage of that matchup, like they were just guarding that straight up. A lot of times when you put a guard on a center, you'll try and front the post. You'll try and deny him the ball. You'll send help. Not only were they not denying him that post up, they weren't even having to send help. And so not only did that clog up everything else, but then you've got that 7-5 monster just roaming around. And they don't have enough shooting to make teams pay for that. So like that's an issue right there. Like part of that last night is, hey, Şengün, we need you to be an all-star. We need you to play at that level. Otherwise, it's just going to make things difficult. And so for Thompson, obviously, he's got to shoot the ball with a little bit more confidence. And you could tell he had none by the time that game ended. I thought he was awesome early in the game. I thought he was aggressive. He attacked. He was efficient with the basketball. And then they let that monster take him away, and he really got in his head. And listen, that's going to happen. Like that's just what that guy is. Wembanyama is just it's nothing that you can prepare for. It's just very, very different, and he's going to have to deal with that for a long time. He's going to have to deal with that at least 4 times a year here, probably for his entire career. How he handles that's going to be important. But again, if they're just going to sag off you and they're going to give you that jump shot, you've got to be able to make it. And if you can't, it makes things very difficult on the rest of the offense just because how much it clogs everything else up.
100% agree. But this isn't even devil's advocate because I agree with the point. But here's what I would add, and the part that was kind of curious in watching it. I didn't understand why they did not run more. Like to me, what you want to do is force Wemby to have to guard somebody, have to either occupy a man or a space, not just be free to roam, anything but free to roam. Okay. And so if Amin Thompson can't shoot, why is he not running more ball screens? We saw like the very few times, 1 or 2 times that they did it, it worked perfectly, exactly the way that it's supposed to work. With a smart read, bounce pass, and Amin Thompson dunk. There you go. Man, Wemby's got 3 fouls at halftime, 4 fouls in the fourth quarter. And the whole time, and especially in the fourth quarter, once he starts really cooking them, I'm like, why aren't they trying to get him out of the game? Why do they want to continue playing against this guy? He's now, Adam, I swear, I'm up there. He had by the time the Rockets had hit their first field goal in the fourth quarter, Wemby had something like 6 or 7 free throws.
Yeah.
So I'm like, why is he shooting all the free throws and not getting his 5th, at least, if not 6th foul here, and using Amin Thompson in some kind of action to allow for that. So that was a part where I thought, you can look at Amin Thompson in a vacuum for his shortcomings as a shooter, but then also like who is supposed to be the brains of the operation that says, hey, let's move around a little bit. Let's not let the best defender by a mile in the league be a help defender. He's probably the best on ball. He's probably the best one-on-one and help defender in the league. But even better, I would say, as a help defender. So just because of his sheer length and athleticism. So I thought that was an issue as well. There was both a personnel and coaching issue to me in that moment.
Yeah, this coaching staff has to be able to come up with answers. And I think that's one of the things they struggle with offensively is coming up with answers. And listen, Ime's not going anywhere. And I've seen a lot of that here in the last month or so. Like they just gave him a huge extension. And this ain't the old days. This ain't the old days when they're going to fire Kevin McHale 11 games into a 3-year extension. That is not happening. But And I think that you've kind of seen this with D'Amico Ryans also. Just the lack of experience on that coaching staff hurts them offensively. And I brought this up. I did the post game thing with Clutch fans last night, and I brought this up before the playoffs. You look at Steve Kerr's bench in Golden State, and I'm bringing them up just because that's one of the standards in this league. Steve Kerr's lead assistant is Terry Stotts. Terry Stotts was a very good NBA head coach for a very long time, one of the great offensive minds in this sport. That's Golden State's lead assistant. The Rockets' lead assistant is Ben Sullivan, who is very inexperienced. And I don't think he would be a lead assistant for anybody else in the entire league. So that hurts them right there. And it's nothing against Ben Sullivan. It's nothing against the rest of that staff. But you look at that staff is probably not good enough just based off of the experience and not having someone who has been a head coach before. Like, I think that you need that. I think that you need somebody who has done it before at a high level who can help answer those questions when you are struggling. And they don't have that right now. And I do think that it's hurting them. And that's the one thing that I would like to see them do moving forward is let's try and add a little bit more to this staff. And again, it's nothing against the guys that they have, but you look down a bench, you look down a coaching staff for an NBA team, the Rockets, you're taking the other team's assistants over the Rockets' assistants probably every single night.
Yeah, it was so much of a focus on the Rockets not having a closer or a go-to scorer, or a guy that you could get a ball to on the final possession and all that kind of stuff, right? And I'm not dismissing it. Like, their half court offense was bad last year, and it's the reason why they went out and got Kevin Durant. But that was the thing so many people, I think, keyed in on in terms of what exposed the Rockets. And so they go out and get Kevin Durant. But then when you lose Fred VanVleet, who up until his playoff run last year, I think was sometimes unfairly maligned and sometimes maybe fairly maligned for some of his shot selection at times. But we saw what that looked like in the playoffs. That series does not become as interesting as it did without him. And so, and now he's gone. Now he's hurt, right? And you really see the value in that. But kind of just to the point of this conversation, or this point in the conversation about the coaching, his injury also exposed what you're talking about, exposed the coaching staff. Like, Fred VanVleet as an extension of the coaching staff, but actually out there playing. Probably Fred VanVleet, if he retired right now, could probably sit on that coaching staff and be just as competent as anybody else that's actually on the staff right now. So you got that in the game. Oh, now you don't. So you're exposed, not just not having a traditional backup point guard. That's where the Amin Thompson, Reed Shepherd conversation comes. But you also don't really have a whole lot of experience on how to navigate without a point guard. And that's the part that's really stood out to me is not only are the players not experienced in that way, but clearly the coaches. I mean, what have people talked about, Adam, all year about the offense? It's a lot of get a ball to Kevin Durant, get a ball to Alperen Şengün, ISO, post up, maybe a little PNR here, a little pick and roll here. And that was what was funny about last night, right? They're moving the ball around. I'm seeing dribble handoffs. I want to say that might have been some of the best ball movement in the first half from the Rockets, some of the best that I've seen from them all year. But it's so touch and go. It's so unreliable. And sometimes it's just like non-existent. So that's probably an underrated part about what was exposed about their not just roster, but their overall team with Fred VanVleet going out.
But you talk about how good the offense looked in the first half. Well, San Antonio countered, and
Right.
the Rockets did not have an answer for that counter. And that's one thing that's on the staff. It's the staff's job to be able to figure out a counter to the counter. And then you make the Spurs have to, counter that counter. And right now it's like, okay, you counter you counter one thing with the Rockets, and it doesn't seem like they have an answer on how to respond to that. And I thought that was the case last year in the playoffs. I thought that you look at kind of what Golden State did, especially, against that big lineup. The Warriors figured out that big lineup eventually. It took a while, but they did figure it out. And then in Game 7, the Rockets didn't really have a response to how Golden State figured out that big lineup. So that's the one thing where the coaching really matters, is that they just don't. I don't know if they have someone who has done. They don't have anyone who has done that before. They don't have anyone who has been able to figure out how to counter something like that on the offensive end of the floor, and that's what they need. That's what they're missing. It's funny. The guy who would be perfect for them right now is Steven Silas. When you think about it, I don't think that's going to happen. But like that's the type of mind that they need. They need that offensive mind who can really help them because the other thing that you notice about their offense, nothing's easy. Like very, even the Durant baskets, he's got to work so hard. And that's kind of been the case his whole career, where he's just so good and so talented that he's going to be able to make those tough contested shots. But at some point, he's 37 and they are leaning on him so much that it becomes tougher and tougher to do that once you get later and later into the season. And the fact that has not gotten hurt is, first of all, it's a huge credit to him. But also, like, they probably need to lessen the load on him just a little bit. Because those minutes are going to catch up to him. He's playing both games of back-to-backs, which I didn't think they'd do. Like, I thought that they would sit him the second night of a back-to-back, or at least not have him play both games, just so, as a way to conserve him. But as this thing has played out, and with Van Vliet out, like, they've needed him. They need him on the floor. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult for them to score. So, like, that's one of the things that they've got to figure out as a staff, as a group here over the last 30-something games.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you if, how concerning are the Durant minutes? We talk about it at every game, as you could imagine. A lot of the people that are there. It's just a thing that we talk about. Like, how many minutes did Durant play? Oh, and we all kind of giving that look like, I don't know. It's a little like he is still excellent. Not a whole lot of drop off in his game, but it's just the father time element. It's the mileage element. It's the guy's been injured before, all of that. And the fact that to whatever degree they do have a shot in the playoffs, and I think you and I agree that they're just a cut below the teams that actually have a shot. You're going to need Kevin Durant, fully healthy Kevin Durant, to even make this worthwhile, to even make it worth doing. So it is a disappointment whenever they have to, like, rush KD back in the game. Like when Durant's out of the game and then the offense slips and it's like, oh, we got to get this guy back in the game. I think it was Sarge and I was sitting next to each other and I'm trying to remember what quarter it was, but it's like, do you rest KD for the rest of this quarter? And it was something like 2 minutes left. I'm like, yeah. And sure enough, they couldn't, right? They had to bring him in for like the final possession or two just because things were slipping. So that's definitely a disappointment. Since you brought up Şengün, though, I'm curious what you think about his season so far, because he started off really strong. I think riding the wave of Euroball and really kind of taking off with that. But there's also seems to be like a wear and tear with that, right? He hasn't really stopped playing basketball, and we've seen a little bit of now he's a little bit more inconsistent, especially since he had the ankle injury of his own, right? So he goes from a couple of nights ago to having the most efficient, high volume game a Rocket has had since Hakeem Olajuwon in the Rockets' first championship year over 30 years ago, going 13 of 15 from the field, right, in a 33-point game, or 33-point performance, to last night, hesitant. Now, I'm not going to say hesitant, rushing his shots, sometimes hesitant, just he almost looked like a young player out there. It was really odd. And it was different from other games where he struggled, where it looked like he wasn't moving as well. This just seemed like I couldn't really figure out what was going on with Şengün. Now, obviously, Victor Wembanyama's out there kind of impacting things, but I went from Şengün's having a really, really great season or a good season, all NBA type of season, to he's okay.
I think he's been better this year than he was last year.
Okay.
And he's certainly been more efficient this year than last year. I don't know how much the ankle is impacting him. I know that's been a thing for really a good portion of the season. I'm not there anymore, so I don't know, what that impact has been. I think last night he was awesome. It's like the whole team. They were awesome to start that game. And then he got thrown off by that Stephon Castle adjustment. And I don't think he knew how to attack that. and you could tell he was just not comfortable with it at all because it changes everything on the floor. Like when it's just Wembanyama guarding him one on one, he knows how to win that matchup just because he's so much stronger than Wembanyama. He knows how to use his body and create space that way. But when it's not Wembanyama on him, and now he's just lurking and he's free to kind of do whatever he wants, plus the physicality that Stephon Castle had against him, you could tell he just wasn't feeling that. And again, that's one thing that he's going to have to get used to just because this is going to happen more often. Like I promise you, if they were to play Oklahoma City in a series, you're going to see a lot of like Alex Caruso on Şengün because that was something that they did with Jokic last year, and that allows Holmgren to freelance a little bit offensively, and he can play off of Thompson to a certain degree. So like what happened to them last night is going to happen more and more. They need to have again, it's on the players to be able to diagnose that on the floor, and part of that is Şengün, and then it's also on the staff to try and come up with a game plan for when that happens that you can just implement once teams go to it. But overall, I think they have Şengün's playing more minutes than he ever has before. It's been down recently, but I remember looking up a couple, maybe a month ago, and he was at 36 minutes a game. Like that's a huge increase. That's like a 20% increase to what he was doing last year, and he was holding up. And I think that people have talked about his defense falling off just a little bit. I think part of that is just the minutes that he's had to play, and he's had to do so much more without Van Vliet on the floor. Like that's the one thing. Remember the last Silas year when Kevin Porter Jr. got hurt, and the Rockets legitimately did not have a point guard for 20 games. And you can say what you want about Kevin Porter Jr., but not having him really hurt. But it forced Şengün to really have to take control of the offense. And I always wanted to ask him this, and I never got the chance to do it. But I always felt like it wore him down a little bit. But it was good because I think that it helped him understand just how good a shape that you need to be in to play a full NBA season at a high level. And I think that he has gotten himself in shape to be able to do that. But again, it's like a pitcher throwing 200 innings. Like when you haven't had to do that before, your body has to be able to get used to it. And so for Şengün, he's never played 36 minutes a game in a season. So his body has to be conditioned now to understand what it takes to be able to do that. So, everybody wants these guys to be finished products right away. Like there's development that comes with everything. And you're just not going to be at your best when you're 23 years old, whatever he is now. Like, so it takes time. And I would say the same thing for all these guys that are still in their early 20s. Like, they're going to get better. Like they are going to improve certain things. And so I think there's always this, and especially after you make the Durant trade, there's always this win now type thing. That's just not how this works. You look at Oklahoma City, they were the 1 seed 2 years ago and they lost in the second round. That helped them. I remember that Dallas series. They looked tired in that Dallas series, and they wore down both mentally and physically. It helped them last year. I think they don't win the championship last year without that Dallas series from the year before. So like this stuff doesn't happen overnight. I know that you went out and traded for a 37-year-old Hall of Famer, but still you got other guys on the floor that have to get caught up to speed with this sort of stuff.
One of those guys that you're talking about when we mentioned young, early 20s, got a 21-year-old Reed Sheppard. All right. And one of the things I was looking forward to in the San Antonio game, to be honest. So, look, we haven't talked about this in a while, but you might remember from even back when he was drafted, I am a card carrying Reed Sheppard supporter. Give me all the Reed Sheppard minutes that I can handle. Right. But with that said, he's had about, by my count, about 3 games now where he shot the ball not so great. And that's coming on the heels of him actually playing really well against the Spurs last week. So I was looking forward to him kind of bouncing back against the team that he helped them beat only about a week before. And it didn't quite happen, but I'm patient with him. I'm one of those that's like, just take whatever the good is with the bad. He offers you an element and a sort of a dynamic or dimension that nobody else really does on the team. So just kind of live with it, even if he's the one cone that you have. And honestly, I feel like he's kind of improved there at times as well. But then, 1 step forward, 2 step back. Reed Sheppard in year 2 has been what?
Much better. Still, again, not a finished product by any stretch, but he's shooting the ball better. Like it seems like he's gotten acclimated to just kind of the distances of the NBA and the athletes of the NBA and getting your shot up against NBA type athletes. So he's shooting the ball better. He's shooting the ball with more confidence. There was that first Denver game. I think it was the first Denver game where he shot 5 of 17, but I loved it. I loved the way that he played because he was so confident with all those shots. And it's like, hey, like when a possession ends with a Reed Shepard three, like that's a good possession. Like that's what we want because he's a 40% 3-point shooter this year. So if he's taking 17 threes a game, as long as they're like good looks, then you're probably going to have a good night offensively. And for the year, I think on balance, I think that they would probably like him to be in the low 40s as opposed to 40, but he's getting better. The thing that he is struggling with is defensively, and that hurt last night. That hurt against the Spurs. San Antonio is a tough matchup for him because they have three guards that they can just throw at him, and they were targeted. They targeted him every opportunity that they had, and it's a big reason why San Antonio got back in the game in the third quarter was because they went after him, especially Dylan Harper, time after time after time after time. That's where he's got to get better. And it's not one of those things that's just going to happen overnight. Like he's got to get stronger. He's got to work on his body. And like he's made some growth in that department, but it takes more than just the one off season. Like it takes multiple off seasons of building on that year after year after year to be able to hang in against really good NBA guards. So that's what he's got to work on. Um, Last night's tough for a variety of reasons. Part of that is, the guy that they took, the guy that was drafted right after Shepard was Stephon Castle, and Castle was probably the second best player in the game. So that hurts, and you can certainly say that they probably should have taken Castle over Shepard. I get that; it's a very fair argument, but it doesn't mean that Reed Shepard can't be a really good NBA player. And that's what they've got to focus on now. You can't focus on who you could have drafted, who you should have drafted. It's about, is the guy that we have capable of being a really good NBA player? And I still think the answer to that question is yes, but it's going to be a process. And he's got to get stronger. He's got to get better at the defensive end of the floor. I give Ime credit for just kind of rolling with it a lot more than he would have in the past. Part of that is that he has to, but they are committed to that guy's success. And I think that when you get towards the trade deadline, why they probably aren't going to do anything is because they want to see him continue to get minutes and continue to get minutes that matter. And that's really important for them moving forward.
So one of the things that we know is going to be a result from Steven Adams being out is more Clint Capella minutes and more small ball. So let's start with the small ball element of it and focus on Jabari Smith Jr., another person that has had an up and down season, and whenever it's been down, it's been really down, right? But to his credit, and to be fair about it, when he plays well, they normally win. When he doesn't, they lose. So that just goes to show you his impact and how important of a player he is to the team. Let's do the same thing with him. How will we assess what I think we can fairly and objectively call an up and down season for Jabari Smith Jr.?
Yeah, I think that obviously you'd like more consistency. And when the shot isn't falling, is he making an impact in other ways? And I think on a lot of occasions, he hasn't been able to impact the game when the shot isn't falling. But I think this. I absolutely love him as a player, just from being around him his first 2.5 seasons in the NBA. He's what you want. Like he cares about the right things. And the defensive versatility really matters. There was one game, I think it might have been Detroit, where he came up with some really big plays defensively that helped them win that game. So yeah, you would like the shooting to be better. You would like the shooting to be more consistent. And that's something that he's got to work on. And he can't lose. I think he loses confidence during games a little too easily. That's something that he's got to work on. But I think overall, he is a winning basketball player. And he is somebody who is he is the perfect modern day basketball player, which is what we talked about when he got drafted. And I think it's why they were so excited that he was able to unexpectedly fall to 3 during that draft. So I think, again, he's been fine. he could be better. The shooting needs to be more consistent. He was at 38% from three for the first couple months of the year. If he can get back to that, I think that you're thrilled with what he's able to do, especially with the defensive versatility. I am interested to see, and I haven't looked at the numbers to see, how they've looked because they haven't played a lot of small ball this year just because they've had the centers. So I'll be interested to see how he looks and how they hold up defensively when playing small ball. But I do think that if they're going to have Amin Thompson on the floor as much as they're going to, they need to be able to have some small ball lineups like that can at least spread the floor and at least give you a little bit of a driving kick game, because that's the one thing that they really don't have. And that's the one thing Jabari at center, I think, allows them to do.
All right, last thing on the Rockets before we switch over to baseball. Got the trade deadline coming up pretty soon here. I don't really have one that's not like an earth shattering type of trade that I don't think that the Rockets going to actually do. So maybe when I do feel like wasting people's time and just having fun, I'll throw that out there, one of those out there. But like you and I are pretty rational, especially when we get together. Is there anything substantive that you can see the Rockets doing at the deadline, or kind of going back to the Adams conversation? Does his injury mess that up, given that Clint Capella is one of your most probably movable, expendable salaries, and now he actually has to log minutes for you? Like, how do you view that shaking up?
I don't think the Adams injury changes anything. Like if they wanted to move Capella, they could. I mean, they have a center who plays 36 minutes a game or 30, be averaging 36 minutes a game. So you can just play small ball, when he's off the floor if you want to. Or you could go and find another center somewhere else who might not be as good as Capella, but could still, play at a decent level. I don't think they're going to do much just because there's just not a whole lot out there that they can do. And they have a lot of constraints that other teams don't have. I mean, the hard cap is obviously the big constraint. Like they just can't take in any salary. And the other issue that they have, I want to take you back to last year. At this time last year, they had Jeff Green's $8 million expiring salary. They had Jayshawn Tate at $7.6 million as an expiring salary. They had Aaron Holiday at $4.6 million as an expiring salary. And then they had Jock Landale's $8 million non-guaranteed contract that they had to trade. Landale's gone, and now those other three guys are making the minimum. So, like, you can't do a whole lot there. How do you know of a bunch of teams that are going to be wanting to pay Clint Capella in his 30s for the next 2 years, even if it's not a terrible number? Like, I don't really see teams that are like going to be jumping at that. And I've heard some people mention, an Adams trade, and even, the guys that they do have that they could trade. Adams is under contract for 2 more years at over 13 million. And now this is 3 of the last 4 seasons have ended early because of injury. So our team's going to be jumping at that contract? Probably not. Dorian Finney-Smith has 3 more years left on his contract. Our team's going to be jumping to try and take that on? I don't think so either. So like the tradable asset that they really have is Tari Eason, and he is only at like $5.5 million this year. So that doesn't get you a whole lot. So there just isn't a lot that they can do right now. I saw some people suggest a Steven Adams and a first-round pick to the Bulls for Kobe White. Like, I get why the Rockets would want to do that, but why would the Bulls want to do that? You're going to have to offer up a whole lot more. You would probably have to give Chicago a pick just to take on the rest of the Adams salary. So, when you're coming up with these trades, and I get people do it and it's fun to do, but you have to look at it from both sides. And so I just don't see anything happening. I think that you brought up gap year. I think that's probably a good way to look at this. I think that they want to continue to play Reed Shepherd at point guard and get him as many minutes as they possibly can. So that kind of takes away the possibility. Like if you were to trade for Kobe White, well, that's going to take minutes away from somebody. So I don't see anything major being out there. I think that they will probably play this out the rest of the way. Maybe they make a move along the margins, and then you kind of recalibrate going into next year when Jabari's contract extension kicks in, so that becomes easier to trade. You can probably do something with Tari Eason's contract. I assume that they're going to at least try and bring him back. Maybe there's a sign and trade with Eason that's able to net them another player. Fred VanVleet won't be able to. I don't think that he'd be able to veto any trade, although I don't think that they have any interest in trading VanVleet. So I think that if they were to do something, it would probably be more this summer, and then just so yeah, they could do something along the margins. They have the open roster spot, but I just don't see a whole lot happening at the trade deadline. I don't know. Do you see? Is there anybody out there? Because that's the other thing. Is like, all right, well, who's the guy out there that's going to help them? Who's the guy out there that is going to take minutes away from somebody else? Because I just don't know if that player exists right now.
Yeah, for me it was the Kobe White, but also the other side, like you mentioned. What's the other side of that? What would be the Bulls' motivation? And the only thing I can lean on is that they're just. I think somebody was calling them. I saw somebody call them the worst team out of the teams that are trying to win. The Bulls being one of the worst teams out of the teams that are trying to win. So maybe you could like lean on them making a bad move or a bad decision, but there's no motivation to get for them to trade Kobe White to the Rockets, and that's kind of the hang up. Is like you can think of a bunch of different scenarios that make sense for the Rockets, but do they make sense for the other team? And how do you anticipate pulling one over on the other team, right? Like maybe it happens, but I don't know, so like, you don't know until you actually see that. Like the Luca trade is a great example, right? Look, we could have done crazy Luca trade ideas at the time and be like, "What are y'all talking about? They're not trading Luca. They're not doing any of those things that you're talking about." We're just like, "But what if they did?" And then they did, But no, that is hard to predict. Now, since I did kind of tease it out there is a I don't want to call it a point. There's a nuclear option, Adam. I think, and I don't know how. Like, you'd have to piece it together for salary between the picks and some other players. But and there, before I even put this out there, can I just be clear? This is not happening. I'm not suggesting it or saying that it's going to happen. But I do feel like the nuclear option is the Giannis Shingun thing. Which so my sense is that they really believe in Shingun as like a cornerstone star for the future and all that kind of stuff. But the Giannis stuff is kind of like it's just like lurking in the background. But like, hey, every one of us that like has heard of basketball knows who Giannis is, right? So you know, so I don't know exactly what that looks like beyond like whatever other salaries would have to match and the picks, but I do know that they've got enough to do it if they wanted to do it, or at least believe that they've got enough to pull it off if they really wanted to pull it off. I just don't think that that's something that they want to do. But if they did, that actually would make sense to me.
It's something that makes sense, but I think it's more of a summer thing. And I first of all, he's hurt. So,
Right.
one of the big reasons that you would want him is because you want him for the rest of this season and want him for a playoff run this year, but you just don't know how available he's going. I mean, this is a guy who's missed time basically every postseason since they won the championship, and even missed a couple of games during that championship run. So that's one reason why you don't do it now. But also, if you do that trade now, you are completely turning over your team in the middle of the season. And there is no reason to think that you will be able to do that successfully. Now, listen, it gives you maybe an idea of how things work with Kevin Durant and Giannis and some of the other pieces that you have the rest of the way. So you get a little bit of intel on that. But I don't think it makes you a contender this year just because you have completely uprooted your entire roster. And that's tough to do on the fly.
But see here's my issue with that though, or the counter argument with that. I do think, look, you're I don't think you're a contender as is or with Giannis. So like I agree with you, but as far as whatever the margins are, I do think a Giannis KD combination with whatever you're left over with, assuming that you don't give away all your shooting in the trade, whatever's left over with Giannis and KD, to me, gives you a better shot at a championship. And this year's complicated because he's hurt. So we'll just kind of have that caveat. But like over the next 2 years, right before KD turns 40, I don't know how long we can expect him to still be at an all NBA level. But if you just want to take this year and next year, I think they give you a better chance at a championship now than probably those other guys do. Than probably any combination of the other guys, especially during the KD window, right? Like the next window is going to be post KD in my mind. So in my mind, it's kind of like you've already push your chips in a little bit on the KD thing. This would just be kind of going all in on, yeah, we got the young guys and we developed them just enough to be good enough to be centerpieces in trades around Kevin Durant and and Giannis. But granted that we don't think either one of those guys is ever going to be as good as Kevin Durant or Giannis. So here we go. That's kind of my logic.
I will tell you, there's one reason to do it now, and that's because if you wait for the summer, more teams can get involved.
That's true.
And if you wait for the summer, more teams will. I think the Lakers get a bunch more first round picks that they can offer in a trade, and I think that's going to be the case for a bunch of other teams. And there will be a little bit easier with some of the contracts also. So, like, if you want Giannis, if you think that that's a route that you want to go down, then the time to do it is probably now, because if you wait, it just becomes a little bit tougher, I think, to pull that off. But the time to do it would have been last summer.
Yeah. Well, who has a better young starter offer? Like I know Ja has been out there, but like, would you prefer Şengün? I would prefer Şengün at
Yeah,
this point over Ja Morant.
especially on the
Uh,
contract. And
oh
to
yes,
have
yeah,
Şengün
yeah.
under contract for 3 more years after. All right, listen, I thought the trade that Milwaukee should have done was Jalen Green and Şengün for Giannis. And maybe you throw in a pick here or a pick there, but that would have kept, obviously, you end the whole Giannis thing, but it would have kept them competitive this year. And like, listen, I know Jalen Green had his detractors, without question, but he was a very important part of a team that won 52 games or 50 games, whatever it was, in the West last year. So I do think that and listen, Milwaukee screwed this up. They should have traded him over the summer, and not trading him led to a couple of really bad decisions with the waving and stretching Damian Lillard, and then signing Miles Turner to that contract. So they hurt themselves, by not trading Giannis last year. But I think obviously the writing is on the wall, and I don't expect the Rockets to be in the mix for him right now if things go badly the rest of the way, or if they feel like there is, an opportunity to get him this summer, then I think they could be in the mix. But, it's kind of a wait and see. But if you do want him, you should at least kick the tires on it now just to see, what Milwaukee might want, and if it's something that you can make work, just because I think it becomes tougher to get him over the summer.
Look, I respect the Rockets for at least being aggressive and doing their best to up the ante with their team. Why is it so hard for the baseball team just a couple blocks down the road, downtown Houston, to spend money? I mean, I understand they brought in, they brought in a pitcher, Imai Tatsuyua. I'm gonna have to get used to saying this guy's name, Tatsuyua Imai. Am I saying?
Better than Dana Brown.
It's a tough one. Admittedly, I trust that Ty Callis and Jeff Blum are going to get me right on this guy's name at some point. But that was their big offseason move. Other than that, you're looking around and what other teams are doing. I mean, for God's sakes, the Dodgers end up with your own Kyle Tucker. You're formerly, Astros World Series fame Kyle Tucker, or at least on that team. I would say was necessarily great. But you see teams up in the ante. You wrote a piece at the Crawford's Boxes about a month and a half ago saying that the Astros' best path to contention, the Astros' best path to contention is to spend money. Can they do it? Why won't they do it? Is it one of those things where you just like kind of wipe your hands of it and just kind of hope that they can scout their way into this thing? Like, why is it so hard to ask the Astros to spend more money?
Well, they do spend a lot. And I think it's important to point that out, that they do spend a lot of money. They have been over they've been over the competitive balance tax now for the last 2 years. But, and Jim Crane has said this, they run it like a business. And they don't, it's not just Jim Crane who owns the team. He's got a group, and they don't want to lose a bunch of money, year after year after year. So that's why you don't see them go out and spend wildly like the Dodgers or some of these other teams, is because they are going to run this thing like a business. And, if you're a fan, that's not what you want to hear. If you're a fan, you don't want them to hang a banner that says we turned a profit in 2025. You want to hang a banner that says we won the championship in 2025. And, I think that they are going to be responsible with how they spend it to a certain degree. They have stayed away from these really big, really long-term contracts because they think that they are irresponsible, and they think that that they basically are negative value in the long run. And I certainly get that thinking, and I certainly understand why they believe that. But at the same time, I also think that it hurts when you're trying to build a team, because you basically take yourself out of the market for, signing the best players in the sport. And you look at just what they have lost with it, Bregman, and then Garrett Cole and Correa at first, and
George Springer.
yeah, Springer, and now Kyle Tucker and Framber will obviously be next on that list. When you don't want to go into those waters, you just bring your ceiling down a little bit, because stars are what win, and the Dodgers have a team loaded with stars, and that's why they've won the last two World Series, and that's why they are the heavy favorite to win another one. So the problem that they have right now is that they let all these guys go without really replacing them, but they had guys behind them that could take their spot. Now they don't really have that. Now they don't have that farm system that can produce all stars. They've got some decent, they've got some okay prospects in that system, but there's no high ceiling guy really there right now that at least is close. I think that the kid they drafted in the first round last year, Xavier Nyans, I think he was the low floor, high ceiling guy that all these prospect lists absolutely love, because they want the guy who's a 60 potential, a potential all-star type guy. Those guys are hard to find, and so they haven't, when they didn't have a lot of first round picks, or they lost 2 first round picks, and then they're drafting at the very end of the first round. Like it's hard to get all-stars that way. And so they went with, the college guys, the high floor, kind of lower ceiling college guys. Bryce Matthews probably a little more of a low floor, high ceiling guy when he was picked, but the kid Walker Yannick is a low ceiling, high floor type guy. So those are good players moving forward, but they're not stars, and they don't necessarily move the needle. And right now, I think they need guys who move the needle. And in order to get guys like that, you either have to draft them, which they haven't done, or you have to go out and spend, and they don't seem to be willing to do that. Now, with that being said, they're still a good team, and I still think that they are contenders in the West. I think that they have a better than 50-50 shot of getting back to the postseason, depending on how, some of the health stuff goes. But they aren't the team that they were, and they won't be until they start developing high impact guys again.
All right, I'm gonna rattle off, okay, because we're at the end here, and I appreciate your time, Adam. Man, it's been way too long. We got to do this again. But I'm gonna rattle off a handful of Astros storylines. These, by the way, are not ranked, but I want you to just hear me rattle them off, take them in. I'm gonna kind of do this a little slowly. So take them in, and then once I finish, I want you to kind of like go at which one do you think is either the biggest storyline or the one that moves the needle most for you. All right. So I'm gonna start with the awkward surplus in the infield with Jose Altuve returning to second base, them bringing back Carlos Correa last year to play third base, and now this awkward surplus with because those guys are going to be on the team. So now this awkward surplus with Isaac Paredes and Christian Walker, and not exactly knowing what to do with that, right? Needing to trade one of those guys pretty soon. Okay, there's one. Who's going to round out the rotation after after Hunter Brown, Imai, Christian Javier, and I guess Burrows? After that, who's the fifth starter? Who are the fifth and sixth starters? As they start the season with like a bunch of games in the first month of the season, with the 6-man rotation. Who are those guys? Okay, mentioned Christian Javier. A healthy Christian Javier, I think, is a kind of an underrated subplot to the Astros season. All right, so let's put a pin in that one. A potentially healthy Yordan Alvarez, right? And these are kind of like knock on wood type of situations, because obviously either guy could get hurt. But you're going into the season under the impression that this guy is healthy when he wasn't exactly that last year. Okay, put a pin in that one. Finding out what Zach Cole is, right? Year 2 Cam Smith. What does that look like? Finding a way to get Bryce Matthews some burn and backup catcher. Who is that? Is it Salazar? Is it an actual backup catcher. No disrespect to Salazar, but like, what are they doing there? Do any of those stand out to you more than others, or did I leave one out that was really big?
So I'm writing about the rotation options here for crawfish boxes. Might probably be up on Monday. So, they got a lot of different options that they can go to for that. I think the big one is obviously the health of Jordan Alvarez, um, just because he's the difference maker that they need in that lineup, and he's also left-handed, which has obviously been an issue for them. So that's absolutely like they need him. Like they need that guy to be healthy. They need that guy to play 140 games at least. Like that's absolutely huge for them, and that might make or break their season. Two other ones that stood out. The infield is obviously there's a glut, and do think that they need to get that settled. And I'll be interested to see because they need to trade one of them. And if they're going to trade one, Paredes is going to be the guy because I think that after the season that Christian Walker had last year and the money that he's owed for the next 2 years, he's got negative trade value. So unless you're willing to kick in some money for that, I think which hey maybe they're willing to do because it might free them up even if they have to eat half of it. It does free them up maybe to do some other things. But I think that you are better off trading Paredes just because I think you can get something for him. And I do think that's an opportunity for them to maybe boost their farm system a little bit because one of the things that they have been hurt by the last couple of years is that when they have needed to go out and fill a hole at the trade deadline, they just haven't had the tools to be able to get that done. So they've been able to make some moves, but like the big move they made last year was Carlos Correa. That didn't cost them a prospect. They had to take on a contract basically, not even the whole thing. But if they wanted to get somebody else of significance, they just didn't have a way to get that done. So for me, trading Isaac Paredes could probably get them an impact prospect, which they are sorely lacking right now in that system. And then the other thing, just the two outfielders with Cam Smith and Zach Cole. Obviously, Cam Smith is that impact guy that they have been missing, that they have not really been able to develop. And they rushed him unnecessarily last year. I don't think that helped him, just bringing him up to the big leagues the way that they did. But I want to see how he bounces back from what was a pretty disappointing second half of the season where he was pretty much unplayable against right-handed pitching. And then is that Cole real? Because this is a guy who really wasn't on the radar at all. I mean, he was an older prospect who was repeating double A last year. And then he gets the promotion to triple A I think it was towards the middle of the season. And then they basically were grasping at straws to try and get somebody who could give them some sort of a spark. And he comes in and did a really nice job. So I'm very interested to see if that's real or if that was just kind of a, lightning in a bottle couple of weeks that they were able to get from him. If it turns out that he's a real guy, that's huge for them moving forward. Because again, it's an impact guy who you've got under team control for 6 years. And the same thing with Cam Smith. You got Cam Smith under team control for 5 years. Like that matters as well if he can bounce back and be the guy that they thought that they were getting when they rushed him up to the big leagues. And then there's one other that you didn't mention, Yainer Diaz. You mentioned the backup catcher. What is Yainer Diaz exactly? Is he a high-level major leaguer, or did he get overexposed a little bit by having to play every day the last couple of years? His best season.
Not to cut you off, I think I left that one out because I already decided that after last year. Maybe prematurely, but that was the impression that I was left with after last year.
Yeah, I think that Dusty was very reticent on overexposing him, and Dusty was like that with a couple players, and I think that Dusty proved to be right, both with McCormick and with Diaz to a certain degree. Not overexposing those guys, I think, helped them in 2023, and then you kind of saw what happened the last 2 years. I thought, and Chandler Rome mentioned this, the possibility of trading Diaz and bringing back Caratini on a similar contract to what he signed for with Minnesota, and then kind of having Walker Yannick, the first round pick from a couple of years ago, waiting in the wings to take over that job. They decided to stick with Diaz. I get that. Diaz can be an impactful bat in the middle of a lineup, but last year was disappointing. And the big thing, we didn't really talk about the change with the hitting coaches.
Mm.
I don't know how much that will matter, but can they get him to stop swinging at everything? And like that's what has held him back more than anything else, is that he just swings. And it has hurt him. It hurts him with runners on base. He was horrific with runners in scoring position a couple of years ago because he would get himself out. So can he get to the point where he is more patient, where he's more selective, and where he is making better swing decisions? A lot of blame got put on the two hitting coaches, on Cintron and on Troy Snitker. Listen, they chased way too much last year. I don't think Snitker and Cintron were telling them to swing at pitches outside the strike zone. I'm not in the hitters' meetings, but I'm pretty sure that wasn't the case. They got rid of Dubon, who's a free swinger. Um, I think they're going to get Paredes back at least, and we'll see what happens there. But can they do a better job of not chasing pitches? Because that obviously has destroyed them offensively the last couple of years.
Yeah, that was the reason why I recoiled a little bit when you said between Paredes and Walker that it'll probably be Paredes that they get rid of because of the negative trade value that Walker has. But I'm like, man, they swing at everything, and they got a very few guys that have like the plate discipline that Astros fans have become to know and love, or that had been, let's say, uh, central to their like identity, right? In the kind of the Astros heyday, we can call it that now, right? So that's something that they used to be very good at back in like the Alex Bregman days. They had their free swingers, right? Jose Altuve's always been their franchise icon, but it's like he's allowed to do that. Like to be a free swinger like Jose, like if you're a 3-time batting champ, you're an MVP. All right, we'll have a little patience with you, even though it's frustrating when he does it sometimes, right? But everybody can't be like this. Everybody can't swing as liberally as they have been. So it's kind of just been a jarring thing. And one of the things that was really like impressive about Isaac Paredes is being kind of more so like I want to say old school Astro, but call it your big brother's Astros. All right, so let's leave with this because you and I are
Let
both
me just say
now.
really quick. Let me
Yeah,
just say
go.
really quick, because
Yeah,
I don't care if they're free swingers. Like I like guys that are aggressive. Just be aggressive in the zone.
yeah.
Don't swing at pitches that are well outside the strike zone, and that's where they get themselves. It's not a team. They still don't strike out a lot, and they didn't strike out a lot last year. But when you are constantly behind in the count, it makes it so that you can't do a ton of damage. And so there's a big difference between 0-1 and 1-0. There's a big difference between 1-1 and 0-2. There's a huge difference between 2-1 and 1-2. And that's where they've gotten themselves in trouble, is that, by swinging at pitches out of the zone, they make life so much tougher on themselves, to where they're having to where their backs are against the wall seemingly every single at bat. So that's where they've got to get better. You can swing at all the pitches that you want that are in the strike zone. I hate it when guys are taking strikes, but you just can't swing at the pitches that are out of the zone. The chase rate cannot be as high as it was last year. So that's the number to watch for them.
All right, Spo, you and I are firmly planted in middle age now. We are
Yes.
middle-aged men, okay?
Washed is what they call us.
Yes, yes. And so with that being said, hopefully though in the middle of our lives and not at the end. Did you ever think that you would live long enough to watch Indiana even compete for a national championship, much less win one? And you got to tell me what that's like. Of course, you went to school there. My father is from the state. My grandmother went to Indiana on my father's side. So you got a direct tie. I've got a little bit of an indirect tie. I was glad to see it. What was it like for you to experience that? And did you ever think that was something that you would see in your living days?
Certainly didn't think it was possible to go 16-0 against the Big Ten schedule and to beat Ohio State and Oregon twice and Miami and Alabama, especially the way that they did it. I thought we were capable of being, and I'm going to say we here because I went to the school, so that's the only time I'll ever do that. I thought we were capable of being a solid program, and but I thought like last year was probably as good as it would ever get. Like, being in the top 10 and going to the college football playoff and playing Notre Dame, like, hey, maybe you can sneak in and win a couple of games in this playoff thing, but like getting to the playoff every now and then, I thought would kind of be, as high as we'd ever be able to get. But to do what they did this year and to go 16-0 and win a championship with the roster that they had, there's nobody on this planet, nobody who went to Indiana, nobody who has ties to the school who ever thought that this could have been possible. And I think that's why you've seen all of us just kind of enjoy it the way that we have. And I think that's why you saw the Peach Bowl be like 90% Indiana fans, which is absolutely, to have the Peach Bowl as a home game is absolutely remarkable. The Rose Bowl was basically a home game. This is against Alabama. Like, this is one of the iconic brands in the sport. And I was at the Rose Bowl. It was 3-1 Indiana fans, maybe even 4-1. It was wild to be a part of.
It's like y'all basically flipped. It was like for if you never knew anything about college football or had no context, you would think it was like Indiana had become Alabama and Alabama had become Indiana. Just
especially
from
when
even looking at it.
You look at the scoreboard, and it says 38-3.
The score and the scene, the crowd, both things felt like basically like the world was on its ass for a second. That was how, and credit to y'all, really cool. But it's like, where am I? What is this? What's going on?
So. Yeah, and I go back, when I was in school from 04 to 07 for football, and we were okay then. My freshman year, we were awful. And then they went out and they hired a guy named Terry Hepner to be the head coach. And if you don't know who Terry Hepner was, he was Ben Roethlisberger's head coach at Miami, Ohio. And he was the perfect hire for that program back in 2004. And the program really started to change and change in the right direction when he got the job. He improved the talent level a lot. And this is when it took some time to actually build a program, because you had to recruit and, you had to recruit high schools, and so you couldn't just like go count on the transfer portal every offseason. So like the first year, I think we won 4 games. And then the second year, the talent level really started to pick up and you could tell. And then he got brain cancer. And so he missed 2 games that second year, which was my junior year. And we lost. They were 2 non-conference games against UConn and Southern Illinois. UConn was a very average, FBS program, and Southern Illinois is an FCS, and we lose both those games, and that cost us a bowl game. We still won 3 games in the Big Ten, which is an accomplishment, especially back then to go 3-5 in conference play, but it cost us a bowl game. Then he passed away that next summer. But the next year, bowl eligible, which is, again, this is when it was a little tougher to go to bowl games. And it was the first time that Indiana had been bowl eligible in 14 years. And so that mattered, and it really galvanized, the program. And it was great for the program, and the talent level was solid. Like, we had 2 guys drafted in the second round after that 2007 season. But then and I do want to bring up, so Hepner's second year, and I'm droning on, and I apologize to all the listeners out there who are getting an Indiana football history lesson. But
hey, y'all earned it. Y'all went out there and kicked belt to ass. Y'all earned it. Go ahead, man.
So Terry Hepner's second season, they beat Iowa. And this was a good Iowa team. Iowa's ranked. Iowa's like a top 15 team in the nation, and we beat the hell out of them. I think it might have been close. I can't remember. But after the game, Hepner does his walk-off interview with ESPN, and he calls the program a rocket ship. And so I think he knew that you could win at Indiana. It was just going to take some time. Then he passed away, and then they gave his top assistant, Bill Lynch, the job. He was the interim after Hepner died. They get to a bowl game. They gave Lynch the job full time after that. And just Bill Lynch should not have been a Big Ten head coach. He just wasn't the right guy to do that job. So the program goes back down. They hire Kevin Wilson after that, and they were just kind of middling for 6 years with Wilson. They had the one good year with Tom Allen. They had a couple of good years with Tom Allen where they were in the top 10 during the COVID season. But then the program collapsed again after that. So it takes, one head coach hire matters. And I don't think, listen, I thought Curt Cignetti would not last. I said it, with Lopez, and I think Landry was still there at the time, where I was like, he'll be gone in 2 years. I didn't think he'd be gone in 2 years because all the NFL teams would be calling him, but that's just kind of how it's worked out. And he is as good a head coach as you're going to find. And they listen, they had really good players, that helps, but that team is so well coached and so disciplined to not have a turnover in 3 playoff games, especially against the teams that they played. That's huge. And I think this is probably my favorite stat for the whole year. They played 16 games. They had like 12 or 13 defensive penalties. To be able to play with that level of discipline and be that good on that side of the ball, it matters, and that's what wins games. And I bet a couple of those defensive penalties were at the end of games when the games were already decided and backups were in there. So they've done a really good job, obviously, with the portal. They've brought in the right guys. I give credit because somebody, I wish I could remember who it was, but it's not like they went out and spent $100 million or whatever in the portal. Like, their portal class wasn't ranked all that high last year. There were quarterbacks who were ranked well ahead of Fernando Mendoza in the portal rankings, but he was the right guy. And like I said, there was somebody who did a mock draft before the season who had Fernando Mendoza going number 1 overall, and I wish I could remember who that was because they were right. And it was a great team. They played the game the right way. They represented the school the way you want the school to be represented. And for us, it doesn't feel like it's a one-time thing either. Like, they went in the portal and got more impact guys. And now when you win a national championship and you have, the NIL money that Indiana does have, and they're going to continue to get because of just the money that the state has, that it's a huge alumni base. They're going to be able to recruit the high schools better than they ever have before. So it's really cool to think that this is a program that has a chance to be, really good here for the next maybe even 10 years. And I think what also matters is that they kept the coaching staff intact. Like, when you think about it, like, he kept both of his coordinators. Like, how is it possible that a team that goes undefeated in the Big Ten and has the 2 years that they had, no one's calling their assistants to try and blow them away with offers? And I do think that Bryant Haynes has said that he turned down maybe a couple of opportunities that he might have had, but I don't know, man. Like, I look at how that team played. I'm trying to get, I might not be able to get Signetti, but I sure as hell am trying to get anybody I can off that staff.
Or if I'm one of those guys off that staff, I'm trying to do the Chip Kelly thing. Like, I know none of those guys are Chip Kelly, but parlay my national championship as a coordinator into if not $6 million job in the NFL or whatever it was that the Raiders gave Chip Kelly just to not even have him for a full season. That's great work if you can get it. So I'm with you right there. Very surprising, but so cool watching y'all get to kind of take all of that in. Indiana basketball school, no more. Football school, Indiana. And this is out of Spolane. Noted, proud Indiana alum. Also from the Crawfish Boxes. Also from the AP, formerly of Sports Radio 610. But my forever podcast partner, brother, I appreciate you for being here. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. This was actually really fun, man. We're gonna have to make a point of it to do it again, man. So I appreciate your time.
Hey, I'm always around. As long as it doesn't end as bad as it did the last time, then we're good.
Hey, can't nobody fire us from doing this free shit that we're doing now. So that's the upside of it. This is for the love of the game. So again, we appreciate Adam Spolane for joining us. Appreciate y'all for tuning in. And until next time, y'all be good.